Hello, welcome to the Roman Cookery School. I'm Edith Evans. I'm an Outreach Officer with the Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust. Over the next couple of weeks I'll be showing you how to cook a series of genuine Roman recipes in your own kitchen. The first recipes we'll be cooking in this session are two from the very earliest collection we have of Roman recipes by the statesman and landowner Cato, and they are for bread and olives, the sort of thing that you might have for a midday meal. Very simple. The bread, of course, is the main component, but we'll start by making the olive conserve, epiterum, because that is much better if it's kept for at least 24 hours before eating, and in fact it will keep for months. We're using a mixture of olives, Kalamata olives, green Greek-style olives and Moroccan black olives, all of which have been processed in more or less the same way as was done in ancient times. And then we will chop them up. Here's our olives chopped up, and these are the seasonings we're going to use for them. A tablespoonful of coriander, a teaspoonful of fennel, quarter of a teaspoonful of cumin and quarter of a teaspoonful of mint. And all these need to be lightly pounded in a mortar just to release the flavours. And we also want a sprig of rue. This is rue from my garden. If you have it in your garden, you need to be careful, because if you brush up against it in strong sunlight, it can give you nasty blisters. It's a herb which the Romans were very fond of. If you don't have it in your garden, well, just leave it out. And you also ought to leave it out if you're pregnant or trying for a baby, because it is rather it does have a reputation for causing miscarriage. So what we need to do now is just to stir them together. Add in a teaspoonful of wine vinegar, and then we pack them into the jar in which we're going to keep them. Press them down and cover them with olive oil. You'll need about 150 millilitres of olive oil, but the actual amount in terms of measurement isn't important. What is important is that all the olives should be completely covered. Make sure there are no bubbles. And the whole conserve will keep for months, because the oil provides an airtight seal, and the olives will just keep for months and months, as I said, and keep on getting better all the time. So here are the olives. Now for the bread. We now move on to Cato's bread, which is unleavened. He doesn't put salt in his bread because he comes from the hills to the northeast of Rome, where they still make their bread without salt, but it's perfectly all right to put salt in if you like, because the other Roman recipes have it in. And we have 500 grams of flour, and we want about 300 millilitres of water. I always have more at hand because it's awkward if you have to go and get some from the tap halfway through. And we start by mixing them together. We aim to produce a reasonably soft dough, but not too sticky. And having mixed our flour and our water together and got our nice springy dough, we now need to do some serious kneading for about 10 minutes. And the best way of doing this to get best results is every time you knead it, you need to fold it over at the same time. This incorporates a lot of air into the dough. There's obviously not as much as if you were using sourdough or yeast, but it does make a huge difference to the texture of the finished bread. So we're in for a long knead, but don't skimp on this aspect. And you can see how the dough has become very stiff and springy, and you can actually see the pockets of air incorporated into it. So now what we're going to do is to cover it with cling film and leave it to rest for an hour. Cato doesn't mention this, but it does give you a better result. When the dough's rested long enough, preheat the oven to 200 degrees centigrade, or 400 if your oven is in Fahrenheit, or gas mark 6. And then take out your lump of dough, and you need to coat it all over with flour, so that it doesn't stick. Press it out on a baking sheet into a circle about 1.5 centimetres or half an inch thick, and then take a piece of clean kitchen string, cut off a piece about 45 centimetres or 1.5 feet, and impress it into the loaf, pushing it down so as to divide it into 8 sections. and then put it in the oven. When the bread has finished cooking, it should be a nice golden all over. So turn it out and put it onto the onto a wire rack to cool. The loaf will take about 30 minutes to cook. If we compare it with how it looked when it went into the oven, you can see that it has actually risen quite considerably. That's in spite of having no raising agent. So we'll wait until it cools and then we'll have a look inside to see what the crumb structure's like. And this is what it looks like inside. You can see there are little pockets of air, but obviously it's much solider than a sourdough would be, or a yeasted bread. But you should always break the bread, not cut it, because cutting it will squash up the insides. And here is our simple Roman meal, bread and olives. Enjoy.